So the topic that I bring before you, I will say first off, is a complete work in progress. As you can imagine, a subject like the many images of Christ is deep and wide. As we have explored knowing Christ and making Christ known as our mission, one of the ways we do that is to think about what scenes might have looked like. If you close your eyes while a scripture reading happens, you have an image maybe that comes to mind of that scene of Jesus with Mary learning at his feet, or with Christ presiding at that Last Supper. So we always have images of Christ in our lives, whether they're in front of us in a work of art, or in our own mind's eye, or in our hearts. When you picture Jesus in your head, and I don't want you to answer this question out loud, but just answer it in your head. When you picture Jesus in your head, what image comes to mind? Think about that for a moment. So early Christianity didn't immediately start depicting Jesus on walls or in carved statues, and there's some reasons for that. We'll touch on those, but they went with symbology. And so how many of you have seen this symbol before? Yes, in some form, right? So this is a really early Chi-Rho with Christ, the first two letters of Christ's name. So you've got the Chi and the Rho, which kind of looks like a P, that's their R, so to remind them of Christ, and the Alpha and the Omega here, so that reference to that image of Revelation. I'm the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. So in science, and then an image from a catacomb of Calixtus. What do you see there on the right side? Fish. Okay, yeah, you could kind of make out a fish, and then what's sitting on top of the fish? What was that?
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Mushrooms are on our minds today. Mushrooms, no mushrooms. Those are the loaves of bread. And so this was an early image of Christ as the provider, but not an image that was trying to picture a face or some sort of image in the traditional sense. For you, our most common symbol might be over on that wall to our right. What do you notice about that image? Yeah, so the empty cross, right? For our Catholic friends, we might also see a cross that is not empty, but has a depiction of Christ on it. That's a whole other subject, and it's fascinating too. We won't get into that. If I went with the image of the cross, we would be here for the next 150 years. This is what they think, a lot of people think is the first image of Jesus as a person image. And what you'll see is we've got a mother over here and this baby, and the baby's nursing. Isn't that fabulous? So interesting, because of all the images of mother and child, Madonna and Jesus, a lot of them are very stylized and beautifully calm. This one's like a real working mom who's feeding her baby. But this is also on that catacomb. So they're dating it around that probably 150-year mark after Jesus' birth. And so this is what people think really is kind of the first beginnings of picturing Jesus in art. Then we move to Jesus being combined with those symbols that were also really meaningful to surrounding cultures. We have Jesus as the Good Shepherd. This picture is around 300, and there are many, many like it. So this is just one example of Jesus being that Good Shepherd. So hearkening to those Jewish roots, because I am the Good Shepherd comes from John, but is inspired by that image of God as the Good Shepherd that we find in Psalm 23 or in Exodus. That one who cares for us, lifts us up on his shoulders and protects us. That one who provides what we need. So that image of making sure there's food and provision no matter where we go with him. And there's some figures down below. Kind of looks like a llama to me. I think we've got some of the members of that flock down below. Then we get into some really high art. This is a Byzantine image. Have any of you seen this image before? Okay, so this is called, yes, you've seen it before. So Christ Pantokrator, which in Greek means Christ over all, Christ ruling over all. And this is from the 6th or 7th century. If you can, with your hand, block the right side of Jesus and just look at the left side of that photo. So the Christ you see on the left side. Now do the same thing, but block the left side of that image and look at the right side. Okay, what do you notice? The eyes. What about the eyes? They're different. They're very different, aren't they? What else do you notice?
Skin tone on the cheek, like he's been beat.
The skin tone, maybe like he's been beaten, or that he's thinner, perhaps, on one side than on the other. The eyebrow. Ooh, the eyebrows. Yeah, we can tell a lot by eyebrows, can't we? Yeah. Right. So the eyebrows are different. Pantokrator. That is an image that I believe, this is my interpretation, meant to draw you in and make you think about the fullness of Christ. So we have Christ that imaged one way looks very compassionate, benign. We have a Christ on the other side, not angry, but maybe just very perceptive. Yeah. So it is that it's a fascinating image, but we've got kind of this real sophisticated approach to imaging Christ. Then we have something called iconoclasm. Has anybody heard that term before? Iconoclasm? Okay. If you've ever gone to the cathedrals in Europe, have you ever gone and all the statues maybe are smashed or have had big repairs done to them? Okay. So part of the tradition of Christianity is this struggle between images and no images. And that's age old, and it's even before Christianity. We've got our second commandment. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. Okay, and I think about that story of when Moses went off to talk to God. And what did the people tell Aaron to do? That was his brother. He was the priest. He was the substitute during that time. Oh, they said, make for us an image. We got to have a God to hold on to. We got to have a God that's shiny and beautiful and worthy. And so they collected all of their gold jewelry, and they had Aaron melt down all of their gold into an image of a calf. Yeah. And they decided, well, that's going to be our substitute God while Moses is gone. And so we have that command here very clearly. Bernard of Clairvaux. So I'm just putting his voice in here because we'll get to our reformers. And part of the Protestant Reformation was this push against images in our worship services, and especially images that were trying to depict God. But there was already some hesitancy within the Christian tradition. And Bernard of Clairvaux, he was also the founder of the Knights Templar, which is fascinating. A whole other story. Bernard of Clairvaux was deeply troubled by the splendor that was being collected in churches, which in his view encouraged attention to the wealth rather than to the divine life that it is supposed to signify. And similarly, and we can, there is a double-edged sword, the Knights Templar, but his effort was to establish a line of royalty in the Christian tradition that would be wholly different and contrasting from the royalty of the world that was very fascinated with big buildings and rich splendor, but to him it was becoming all kind of enmeshed, and people were paying much more attention to who had the best statue or the most gold embossed on the walls of their churches. So then we get to Martin Luther. So Martin Luther kind of had a softened approach to images. He said images are indifferent. They're a tool, just like anything else. So they can be used for good. They can be used for our detriment or become our downfall. He said there are images for memory and witness. So if images are used for teaching, they can be very good things. So he felt like there was nothing wrong with having an image of, Moses and, parting the waters of the Red Sea to help explain that and teach faith, or Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. He said that would be helpful, especially for people who couldn't read, which was part of the usefulness that many churches felt, that depicting images of Jesus' life or the saints' lives in stained glass helped teach. He said the emphasis should be on the heart. If it is not a sin but good to have the image of Christ in my heart, which is what we do, when we're thinking about Jesus, an image comes to mind. Why should it be to have a sin to have it in my eyes? And so he had kind of this nuanced approach to religious art. He said these things, but one of Luther's colleagues, Andreas Bodenstein von Karlstadt, adopted iconoclastic view. So iconoclasm is against those kinds of icons and images, and began wreaking havoc while Luther was in hiding at the Wartburg Castle. And there was a particular phase of destruction where people in the Reformed tradition were going into churches and burning images, just scratching out the faces of icons and really desecrating worship spaces, all in the name of kind of purifying the religion, making sure that the focus was on God and not on this particular image that had been created by a person. John Calvin similarly had this evolution in his thought about religious art. He came out pretty forcefully in his first edition of the Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion in 1536. He said, God wishes his temple to be freed from images. And so if you walk into some of our very old Protestant worship places in the United States, sometimes they won't even have a cross at the front. It will be this all blank space, just pews and enough functional furniture at the front to be a focus. Then he kind of expanded that thought. He said, certainly it is permissible to make use of images. So sort of what Martin Luther was saying, if they're useful for teaching and for growing in faith, sure. However, God wishes his temple to be freed from images. So he was really more focused on that worship space, that images outside of the worship space, okay. Images inside the worship space, no. His final edition of the Institutes, he has a further evolution of thought. He says, visible representations are of two classes, historical, which give a representation of events, and pictorial, which merely exhibit bodily shapes and figures. The former are of some use for instruction or admonition, and the latter are only fitted for amusement. For amusement, yeah, right. And then he had some further thoughts in 1563. So, we're talking a couple decades later. He's still kind of thinking through and rethinking. He said, the majesty of God, which is far beyond the reach of any eye, must not be dishonored by unbecoming presentations. So his thought was that you could try your best to put the image of God or the image of Christ on paper or on canvas or on wood or in stone, but it's going to be a fallible thing because you are a human being, and it's going to be incomplete. He was concerned too about what Moses had faced, concerned about gross idolatry, so representing human wisdom replacing that divine revelation. He said, we must cling to this principle. God's glory is corrupted by an impious falsehood whenever any form is attached to him. So even our best efforts can lead us toward idolatry, and idolatry making an idol of something that is not God. Anybody know this painting? Kind of dark. Anybody recognize it? It was in the news about 8 years ago in a big way. So the name of this work of art is Salvator Mundi, Savior of the World, Savior of the World, attributed to Leonardo da Vinci. Dated, they believe that he started this work of art, and they know that he created a piece called Salvator Mundi, which was an image of Christ, about a half image is what they call it. It's from the waist up. He started it in 1506, didn't finish it till 1513, and it was for King Louis XII, a commission for royalty to possess. It is a contemporary with the Mona Lisa, if it is real. This particular work of art fell out of known existence for hundreds of years. There was no continuous record of its provenance. It resurfaced in the early 1900s. And so people have gone on and on about, is this authentic, or is this someone's, whether it was a faithful painting in the style of Leonardo da Vinci, or perhaps someone had seen the original Salvator Mundi and tried their best to replicate it after its disappearance. We don't know. If you're interested in art history and how this painting has been researched, it's a fascinating story. It was sold most recently at Christie's in New York in November 2017 for $450 million. It is a new record price for a piece of art. How do you as Christians feel about that? Any thoughts? Okay, I get a thumbs down in the back. All right.
You could make better use of it.
You could make better use of it. Okay, of the $450 million. Okay, yeah.
Two people thought it was real.
Two people thought it was real.
They bid against each other.
And they bid against each other. Yes. Right. It takes two people to think it was real, right? Not just one. Right.
Here's a different view.
Yes.
If you believe it's real
Uh-huh.
and you want to preserve it, make sure it's taken care of.
Yes.
Okay. And you have that kind of money.
And you have that kind of money and you want to preserve it.
Yes.
Right.
Maybe it's okay.
Yes. When we think about the other works of art by Leonardo da Vinci, I think most of us agree they're pretty priceless, right? I mean, we do assign value to good works of art in critical periods in history. We know Leonardo da Vinci was not only an artist, but an incredible scientist. The orb in particular, if you look at the orb on the right, it is so unusual. This piece of, I don't know if it's crystal or glass, and that's become the subject of a lot of study too, because they said, like, optically, the artist got it wrong of what it's reflecting. And so what does that say? Is that a theological statement by Leonardo da Vinci, if it's his, or is that a case against its authenticity? Because Leonardo da Vinci would have known how to paint something with that kind of optical sophistication. It's fascinating.
Gotta remember,
yes.
he had a sense of humor.
He did have a sense of humor too. You're right. Absolutely. And sometimes he would rebel a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I'm going back to my first question. When you picture Jesus, though, in your head, what image comes to mind? This isn't a trick question. Yes.
Darker skin,
Uh-huh.
hair of a sheep wool.
Darker skin, kind of rough clothing.
And hair like a sheep wool.
And hair like a sheep wool. Okay, so pretty tight,
Yeah.
tight hair. Yes, thank you. Who else? Yes, Cheryl.
I picture him because I like LL Bean jeans.
Yes.
He's gonna dress like we do now because he comes to us now.
Mm-hmm.
He wears LL Bean jeans.
He wears LL Bean jeans
Sometimes has a turtleneck on.
and sometimes a turtleneck. I like it.
And he sits with me, and
Yeah.
if Ted's not around, I sometimes give him a cup of coffee too.
Wow. So he's a guy at the kitchen table.
He can be at the kitchen too. He
Yeah.
actually likes to sit cross-legged on. We have a dog bed right in front of the fireplace where
Right.
we read the Bible in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And he likes to sit there and pet the cat when the cat's there. So,
I love that.
I like talking to him,
Yes,
but
yes.
I can't picture him in a robe coming into my house.
So maybe not in a robe, more like blue jeans.
Well, and it's LL Bean because they'll last for 20 years. So
So he chose sensible blue jeans that would last. I
It might
like
have been
that.
Carhartt, but
Well, I'm glad you mentioned clothing. Yes, her.
well, he's not a little wimpy guy.
He's not a little wimpy guy. Okay. Yeah.
He's a carpenter,
Yes, he's a
Probably.
carpenter.
above average height
Above average height.
for
Okay.
his time,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and very charismatic appearance.
Charismatic appearance. He drew people to him.
But
Mhm.
a strong, healthy outdoor kind of guy.
A strong, healthy outdoor
I mean,
guy
To add
Okay.
to her image, he'd
Yes.
drive up in a pickup truck.
in a pickup truck. Oh, man, I want to see you all try your hand at these. It's very specific. So when you're talking about clothing, I think that's fascinating because you're right. As human beings, when we picture somebody, usually they have clothes on. This depiction of Salvator Mundi would have been pretty amazing at the time because this was Leonardo da Vinci's equivalent of putting Jesus in blue jeans, or maybe really nice blue jeans. He's in a contemporary robe. This is a Renaissance robe, which would have been the modern clothing style in Da Vinci's time. So he's dressing him in the equivalent of your button-down shirt, or a really nice tuxedo or something like that. It's pretty remarkable because Jesus, of course, wouldn't have worn anything adorned with jewels. We know that. We know that much about carpentry and what it paid. So this question, have you ever seen this one?
Yeah.
You've seen this one? Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to explore this image for a minute. And I want to give credit to 99% Invisible. It's a podcast written and formed by a man named Roman Mars. And he describes 99% Invisible as a podcast about design. He said in the same way that Moby Dick is about whales. So he uses design as a jumping board to explore a wide range of topics, theological, mechanical, aesthetic, and more. And so in February 2025, I was listening to my podcast like I do, and they had one called Your Very Own Personal Jesus, Your Own Personal Jesus. And it was about this painting, which I never knew anything about other than it just seemed to be in a lot of churches. And is sometimes people's hair. So it was created by a man named Warner Solomon, and it was first sketched by him in 1924 in black and white. Warner Solomon was the son of Swedish immigrants born in 1892 here in the States. He lived in Chicago. And he professed faith in Christ at age 16. They think he was in a kind of a culturally Christian household, but he really had a conversion kind of experience at 16. He trained in art at the Chicago Art Institute, and he, like a lot of aspiring artists, drove himself to New York City. He was going to make it big. And then he came back to Chicago for a job at Warner Press. He decided that between his faith and kind of not really finding a market niche in New York, he would work for a Christian publisher and do his best to use his art to God's glory. He was a member of the Church of God. Anybody know anything about that denomination? It's in the Protestant tradition. It's a more evangelical denomination. And they own Warner Press. And Warner Press in the 20s and 30s was trying really hard to evangelize to young people. And so they came out with a magazine, and they wanted to have the magazine cover be very intriguing and engaging and inviting. And they said, the publisher said to Warner Solomon, make me a compelling image of Jesus, one that's going to speak to youth today. And so he would eventually draw that portrait, this one, in black and white over 500 times in different parts of the country and talks about his faith and the ways he saw this image of Christ in a vision one night. Or he might have also been inspired by this artist. If you kind of zoom in right here, we've got that same profile, about the same kind of hair. So it doesn't mean that he copied, but he did, as an artist, study other artists. Most artists do. And this was done by Leon Augustin Hermite in 1892. I think that's out of order. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this image because it's fascinating what happened next. So he drew that charcoal sketch in 1924, and then his publisher said, "That's nice, but what I really want is something that's going to be a standout. Can you make a color image?" And so that's where he came up with this one. And it was published on the front of the magazine in 1941. And the publishers liked it so much and it was so engaging that they decided, well, this needs to be something that we can replicate and use to bring more people to God in Jesus Christ. World War II happened, and they got a commission from the US government to reproduce this image on little cards, devotional cards. The soldiers could take any number of religious cards, but a lot of them wanted this one. And for some of the reasons that Herb outlined, his editor asked for a more engaging, strong, masculine Jesus. Didn't explicitly ask for a white Jesus, but we can say this man looks more white than Middle Eastern or African, which would be more historically likely. But he wanted someone who would look like a person people would want to know. And this particular image has been replicated over 1 billion times now. It's still sold on Amazon. Many churches were encouraged to get it because of its usefulness as an evangelism tool. And Warner Press was very happy to give and sell rights on church fans, bulletin covers, home size portraits of this Jesus. And Anderson University, which is also birthed by the Church of God, is in Anderson, Indiana, and they now own the original of this painting. They have, in fact, a whole Salmon collection, because this wasn't the only image of Jesus that Salmon did, but it's probably the most famous and certainly the most reproduced. However, it has also become an icon in an unfortunate sense. It's been used to make the case that Jesus was in fact this, and it's been adopted by, I would say, the white supremacist movement in the United States. And Anderson University, to the point that they have said they welcome people to come view the original painting. This painting is part of the Salmon collection at the university's Shireman Gallery. As we do so, however, we unequivocally stand for the truth that Jesus cannot be represented on canvas or in any other medium by one ethnicity alone, that the head of Christ is one depiction of the Savior, but not the only one. And I find it both heartening to hear the artist Solomon's intentions, which was to bring people to Christ. Anytime he would make a talk, he talked about his faith and the ways that he identified so closely with Jesus through drawing and depicting him. At the same time, this has become such an icon within the American consciousness and beyond, but largely the US, that people don't know where this came from, and that almost adds to the mystery and the ethereality to the image. Salmon was also fascinated by the trends in American portraiture. How many of you have a yearbook photo of maybe you looking often? This is called the eternal gaze. So you're not looking at the camera, you're looking somewhere here, sort of at a 45-degree angle up. Anybody have a yearbook picture like this or a senior year photo like this? Yes. It became very popular and they kind of fed into one another. This was a model for many photography studios to bring a certain sense of eternity and timelessness to a photo or portrait of a person. And I don't know about you, but it really does look like a beautiful senior year picture of Jesus here. But his glowing robe, I mean, he really meant for this to capture both the humanity and the divinity of Jesus. Any other thoughts on why this particular portrait of Christ, called Head of Christ, is so engaging for much of the U.S. consciousness? Yes, Bob.
When I look at this, I'm looking at his eyes.
You're looking at his eyes. Tell me more about his eyes.
Well, he's kind of looking out and up,
Mm-hmm.
like he's engaging with the Heavenly Father.
Mm-hmm. Right. So there's some sort of implied relationship in this photo. Okay. Your portrait. Yeah. What else? Yes.
It's like he has a gentle and kind face.
A gentle and kind face. Yeah. So there's that mixture of masculinity, but also kindness and compassion. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I encourage you to find that podcast if you're into listening to interesting stories of 99% Invisible, because I have found that it really has helped me think and put into perspective this particular image of Christ, but also thinking about how other images of Christ can expand our thinking and understanding about the person of Christ. This photo of the artist Salman there, if you'll notice, he dated this picture 1967, right here. It was a year before he died. So he was very popular in painting and drawing this in front of people over and over. So it's pretty amazing party trick there that he had. I put this in because I think it's a reminder of how very comforting the image of Christ can be. Anybody want to take a guess as to what this image depicts? Yeah, the Last Supper, right. And you've got this very different image of Jesus in this outstretched hand. Do you see that? What does that make you think of? Yes.
I like the picture because it depicts the apostles, how young they were.
Oh, yeah, how young they
They were
were.
very young.
Right, yeah, we usually think of them as like these distinguished guards and big beards. These are beardless disciples and a beardless Jesus. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah. What else do you see or notice in this particular? I know it's grainy.
He has the curly hair, not the long.
Yeah, he's got the curly hair. Yes, yeah, and it kind of chopped. Maybe a rough chop there. Mm-hmm.
Looks like he's talking.
He looks like he's talking. Yeah, his mouth is a little open.
His hand is out like he's making a motion.
Right. Usually people are making hand gestures, not silent, but when they're talking. Yeah, when they're talking. Absolutely. Yeah. I think about this little disciple over here.
Yeah.
Who's that kid? I love it.
Well,
It's
the one on the
interesting.
left too.
And the one on the left. Yeah. And maybe they were full-figured men and this artist was trying to get that perspective around the table and, just optically didn't quite get there. What do you see below? Yeah. So it was over someone's grave. And to think about someone saying, I want Jesus and his disciples, and I want to be there. I think there's something really poignant about that. Obviously the catacomb was emptied a long time ago, and there could be many reasons for that. It could have been a destructive reason, it could have been reuse. As we know, catacombs were used for hundreds of years and sometimes recycled. Could have been excavation of someone who was pretty careless and not really, thinking about the dignity of that person. But the artwork has been preserved for the most part above it. Modern artists, there are many, 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 but one is a fellow CTS grad of mine, Columbia Theological Seminary, Lauren Wright Pittman, and her artwork is just expanding, but she tries to image Christ in many different ways, many different shades of skin color and context. You'll see behind in sort of modern ideas and imagination of how Christ is with us today. You probably have your own favorite artist, I hope. But questions to ponder, because I know we're getting short on time. This is a huge topic, but I thank you for exploring it with me and kind of thinking a little more kind of critically and appreciatively of those for whom art and faith intersect in their gifts, spiritual gifts they offer us. How can we approach and appropriately use images of Christ today? How can we do that? I think about our worship space here in Westminster. Do we have any images of Christ in our worship? Oh, in the chapel. Yeah, in the chapel, there's a stained glass picture of, it's called the Good Shepherd.
And we have the paintings.
And we have the paintings, yes, the Stations of the Cross paintings, which is unusual for a Protestant church to have. Yeah.
And we have pictures of Jesus, and many of them hanging around the church.
Different paintings of Jesus hanging around
Different
the church.
styles.
Yeah, different styles, right. Mm-hmm.
It's the cross.
The cross, just the cross. Yeah. So the cross in our sanctuary was, probably most of you know, was carved by a church member, Dr. Bob Sumner, and he has his own story of that cross and its work being an act of devotion and community, as he couldn't have done it by himself. He enlisted others to help him. And some in the church, when it was put up, said there's not enough gold on it. Isn't that interesting? And Bob told me recently, he said, I told him I can't be the one to put more gold on it. That's not my style. That cross is for devotion so they can see through it to Jesus. It's not about how rich it looks. Yes.
About 60 years ago, I asked a Catholic novitiate, what does Jesus look like? And the answer was, she's black.
She's black. Yeah,
I
okay.
wonder if in those 60 years has that become a trend to have non-specific gender or race?
Yes, and I'm thinking specifically of a more modern depiction of the Trinity. I don't know if I've seen that. I wish I could find it for you. Maybe I can find it for you. Of three women, and one is passing this world that has an umbilical cord still attached, and it's this beautiful it's not just an image of Christ, but about the Trinitarian God and the connected nature of those three. But there's not a father figure, it's a mother figure and a daughter figure, and then this like interesting world being shared among them. Yeah, so I think what we can agree is there is no one image of Christ that is the right image, right? There is no image of Christ that is the image. And so any effort to name one as superior to another or as the only is something we have to avoid. I think, too, we need to acknowledge some of the sins of the Protestant Reformation in the destruction of so much work that really could have been good teaching tools. And when we think about, other groups in the world today that are out to destroy all art, perhaps, or any art that they don't like, Martin Luther came out of hiding because he was so disturbed by Karlstadt, his colleagues' propensity to encourage violence. Because when you destroy art violently, often people are hurt in the process, not just their feelings, but real people and cultures. What is this distinction between religious art and secular art? Any thoughts on this one? It's a big question, I know. Yes, Herb.
It's in the eye of the beholder.
In the eye of the beholder. Ooh, fascinating.
Yeah, I agree with that also in how it's being presented.
How it's being presented.
Context.
The context. Okay. Yeah. Right. Thank you. So maybe where it's located. Okay. Right. Or in what manner is it displayed?
I think something could be the same image, the same painting or photo could be used in both sets.
So the same painting or photo might be religious in one context and not.
Used secularly.
And used secularly in another. Interesting. Yeah, like in an art history class, it's not being venerated or being used as a biblical teaching tool. There. Yeah. Anybody remember those news stories? I feel like we've seen them less now, but someone says, I have Jesus in my piece of toast. They see the image of Christ or in the tree out front. And so, what do we make of that? Right. I mean, and we know scientifically our brains, and I think that's a beautiful way God created us. Our brains are hardwired to recognize faces. We see faces everywhere, even when they're not. And if you go to the Franklin Institute, they have a whole fun room for kids to explore. Why is it that we see faces in doorknobs and on trees and in sewer covers? Like we see faces, we see those two eyes and a nose and a mouth. And we're kind of hardwired to seek out. We're drawn to images that resemble us. It's a survival kind of instinct that we have. How do we understand art and artistic expression in the context of worship? I think as Protestants, we go back and forth on how much and how do we use art and artistic expression in our worship services. We are often we're people of the book, or people of the word, but can images add to our worship? We have two screens in our worship space, and sometimes we show an image in the context of a sermon. How can that be helpful? How can that be distracting? Yes, Cheryl.
Well, a lot of people learn more visually than they do by hearing.
Yeah, so Cheryl, if you couldn't hear, I said a lot of people learn more visually than they do by hearing. So our different senses, some people are more tuned and able to absorb more with an image. Great. Yes.
Our previous church in Pittsburgh one time had like a dance performance.
Yes.
And I think it probably helped that her dad was on like the session or something.
Okay.
There was a lot of like controversy. Some people thought it was beautiful. I mean, it's very tasteful and everything.
Yeah.
But I'm still looking back thinking, I think we were kind of like, no, that's not the place. But
right.
If you're deciding to do it the next few weeks, I won't complain. But yeah, just a different.
Gonna have to put my costume away for next Sunday. Well, liturgical dance, I think, has been used and is used, and I think that's something that for some people it is a beautiful expression of faith and way of thinking through God's movement in our lives, and for other people, it doesn't resonate with them or feels like a distraction.
All through this, I was wondering if you were going to get to one particular picture that struck me so much years ago.
Yes.
And I couldn't remember the name of the artist. It's a young girl when she did it. I just Googled name of girl who painted Jesus, and it came up. Any of you nearly remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So her name is, get it smaller again. Lucky Ann Kramarek said she was 8 years old when she painted the face of Jesus from her recurring heavenly visions. She never expected the painting to become a worldwide renowned masterpiece. It is an incredible picture. The eyes, just the eyes. I could sit and stare at it all day. But of course, people said that's way too sophisticated for any 8-year-old.
For an 8-year-old,
As she got
yeah.
older,
Mhm.
you know, they decided, well, let's just see if she can really do it. When she got older, and she might have been 12 or 13, someone gave her a canvas and they had a camera, and they asked her to paint Jesus that way, and she did it, and they did it in time lapse, so you could actually see her doing that image.
Kind of a Solomon testimony there of painting live. That if you couldn't hear, but it was a girl who started at 8 years old, painting an image of Jesus, and yeah, that I think who are we to say that God doesn't use our innate gifts? Stephen, and I want to acknowledge those who are joining on Zoom. Thank you so much, Stephen and Tom and Bob. Stephen, you've got a question or comment?
Comment. The other interesting thing about that image, there's a young man, I can't remember his name, who went through a near-death experience. And when asked what Jesus looked like, he said, that painting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think Dave might be able to corroborate that.
Right. Yeah, and I'm sure that's probably the case. And how influenced are we by the images that we see?
Very much.
Yeah, that we see from day to day in Christian art or otherwise. Yeah. Yes.
What I was going to say was, you can't just look at art as being something that's written, that's painted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, art's music.
Art is music. Yeah.
Art is a written word.
Right.
So we use all those in worship.
We do. We do. Yeah. A lot of times when we think of art, we think art museum, portraits, pictures, maybe statues, but you're right. Art can be music, it can be poetry, it's movement. I mean, it's many things, even clothes we wear. Yeah.
I think if you think back to how Cheryl described her image of Jesus
Mm-hmm.
in the blue jeans and sitting on the floor there, that if that were a painting, it could be used, at least in my mind, as an expression of how Christ is personal to us.
Yeah.
And he's with us, not as some distant historical figure who taught Christianity beliefs, but who's actually there in our presence.
Of Christ who's with us today. Yes, and present. Yeah, right. So I think that's an encouragement for us to continue to seek out those images that speak to our time and to the multiplicity of humanity and the global church. I think about this question: what kinds of art bring you closer to God? Because I think it's probably different for each of us. And thinking about Nancy's comment, maybe it is music that brings you closer to God. We don't want to make an icon of the music. Music's not our God. How do we feel God through music? Yes.
I think one of the most interesting things when I was in Nazareth, there's a church of the Marys.
So Betsy's talking about the church of the Marys in Nazareth.
Yeah, and it's all these different images of Mary from all over the world and all the different cultures. So you see like a Japanese Mary, and you see, one from Europe and one from Middle East, and then all these different pictures. And you realize it's what's inside you that you see this reflection of who these people are. This is not Christ, but it's, Mom. So, and that was so impressive to me because I really hadn't, we have one thought of what Mary would look like, right? And Mary is all over, and that's what it means to all of us in our own context.
Thank you. Yeah. So the Church of the Marys in Nazareth, in the Holy Land, and how they have found different depictions of Marys from every culture. Yeah, every circumstance. I want to end with this thought. Looking at each other, You are made in the image of God, and Christ abides in you. And that goes for me and for you. So I invite you to look at one another for just a moment. I'm looking at the folks on our screen. I'm seeing some of you. Bob, thanks for joining us. Bob, thanks for being here. Stephen, Tom, thank you. And each and every one of you, because I do believe that's part of our Christian witness. We are that image of the invisible God. Was it Mother Teresa who said, no, you may be the only gospel someone will ever know. So I will leave you with that. And I do believe that this is one we can continue to struggle with, acknowledge our own propensity to sin and idolatry, and at the same time, our incredible ability to create as we are created in the image of the Creator.
Yeah, if I can just share something real quick.
Yes.
The Philadelphia Museum of Art has a Rembrandt collection called The Heads of Christ. And he was commissioned to do a painting of something big, but in order to perfect his vision of Christ, he brought in Amsterdam was a very international city. He brought in Mideastern workers and used different models to perfect his image of Christ.
Different people, fascinating.
And there's multiple images, and they have a lot. It's a permanent exhibit at Philadelphia Museum of Art.
That's great. That's great to know. Thank you, Herb. If you hadn't heard, Herb, Philadelphia Museum of Art has a gallery of Rembrandt's images of Christ, and
It's actually a wall.
Real people, a wall.
Yeah.
No, that'd be a great field trip. Yeah. Anybody else have any final comments or tips?
No, but if they were all listening to the cherubs and the youth choir singing, they said to look at each other in the song and see God's love in each person, that each of you are God and you have God's love inside you. So if you were listening to my little kids, I call them mine. Tim and Kirsten don't seem to mind that I claim them. But that was to look at every one of you. You are Christ. You are God. You give God's love to me, and I am in turn to give God's love to you.
Amen. Amen and amen. I think that's a good stopping place. Thank you. Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I really like the image of the Last Supper.
Yes.
Because the apostles are really young. People don't realize that they were like 13, 14 years old.
Right. So I think good art also helps us ask new questions and think. So thank you, Joe. Yeah, it's very thought-provoking that them being depicted in a different way. Well, thank you all. Yeah. Oh, yes.
I always thought there were 12.
12.
Yeah, there
There were only 10.
I think maybe there were a couple others down below when the tomb was opened. They were destroyed in there. Okay, well, I hope we can continue discussions at lunch. Thank you so very much for time today.